All praises unto Yahweh Shemi Shai, double honesty, apostle of GMS, honest true brothers will be pushing this truth in sincerity. Okay, I got a few articles, two articles here for you. Speaking on the crisis that you got out there in Puerto Rico. All right, one article is going to be getting into what's that going to mean for the rest of the economy, the rest of the so-called global economy. One article going into the backstory and the history and so on and so forth of what's actually happened out there. So if you don't already know, this is going to be the premise of it. So it says everything you wanted to know about the Puerto Rican debt crisis, but were afraid to Google. All right, it says Puerto Rico just defaulted on a 422 million debt payment. Okay, so when we go into this article and it says here, Puerto Rico to default on its debt in 2 days, Monday, could trigger a U.S. bank. We're talking about something that happened yesterday. Okay, because this article was written a day ago. All right, so this article was, I think it was written a day ago. So bear with me. When I searched it in Google, it was supposed to be a day ago. Let's see when this was written. Okay, so it says on Monday, the 2nd of May, and we are at Wednesday, 4th May. So this could trigger, according to this article, a U.S. bank collapse. All right, so let's get some premise. It says Puerto Rico to default on Puerto Rico just defaulted on 422 million debt. That's the largest default yet in a debt crisis that already has school children suffering, bondholders sweating. And when we get into this article, you're going to find out why these bondholders are sweating, because pretty much they're sweating because there's new legislation that's just come into play not too long ago that they're calling the Boldy. All right, I'll read this a little bit. It says this is euphemistically called a haircut, but for some investors it's called a Boldy. Right, some investors getting nothing. And when we come back to this article, you're gonna see what they're talking about. That's pretty much talking about how they've invested in certain things in these banks, and when these banks collapse, all right, the new legislation is they get nothing, man. All right, so they're trying to slow this collapse down that's gonna happen to the dollar. They're trying to slow it down as much as they can, but ultimately they're not gonna be able to do anything about it. All right, it says the largest default yet in a debt crisis, and let me read on to the next thing. It says Paul Ryan beating back mutiny. Democrats feeling good about their chances in Florida this November, and you searching the internet for an explainer on this whole mess. And it says here then is everything you need to know about the Puerto Rican debt crisis. It says how did Puerto Rico get into a fiasco? All right, and one thing I wanted to mention is the fact that we got this country named Puerto Rico, which means Port of Riches, and they're in a debt crisis. That lets you know what's happening out there, man. All right, that lets you know how Esau plays, because Esau will come into your seat, take all your riches, because it's a port of riches, and leave you with nothing, man. All right, he'll set up his banking system that's gonna, really, when you look at it on a deeper level, all right, he'll set up his banking system within your country, all right, that he deliberately allows it to crash. And that lets him, get all the riches within that country even cheaper, man. All right, there's numerous examples of how he's done that to different countries, man. And then he gets what he wants out of that country cheaper. All right. It says the short answer is the island has been in recession for 10 years. All right, and during the decade-long downturn, its government papered over budget shortfalls by borrowing gobs of money from foreign investors. All right, we'll touch on those foreign investors when we get back into this article. It says, what's the long answer? It says laws passed by the U.S. Congress inflated a massive manufacturing bubble in Puerto Rico. All right, now what did I just say? All right, I said they'll come into there, they'll set up their businesses and their monetary system. All right, and what you're seeing here, they're pretty much saying they had laws passed to where you had an inflated economy. Now, what do you have out there within the United States right now? You got an inflated economy. All right. It says while simultaneously encouraging investors to buy islands debt, even when territory's economy was in distress. All right. It says for over 80 years, the federal government used tax breaks to coax corporations into operating in Puerto Rico, so as to boost the island's industrialization and to keep tax allergic companies on American soil. All right. It says the most significant of these is section 936. It says a provision of the tax code which gave U.S. companies an exemption of all income originating from American territories. After the provision was passed in 1976, manufacturers and pharmaceutical companies flooded into the island with jobs. Manufacturing became the single most important sector in Puerto Rico's economy. It says, but the island's competitiveness rested on those tax breaks. Puerto Rico has the same minimum wages as the United States, and workers are less productive. In the 90s, anger over outsourcing and corporate tax evasion led the Congress to phase out 936, and if Puerto Rico was a state with two senators and congressional delegation, all right, which they're going to touch on that congressional two senators and congressional delegation in this article, it is possible that the island would have retained some version of the benefits. It says in 2006 the exemption were history and saw Puerto Rico's manufacturing boom. It says the territory has been in recession ever since, but the island did see continued growth in one prime export debt. Okay, let's read that again because that's going to become relevant when we come back into this article. All right, but basically what they're saying here, their most prime export now was debt. So they was getting into more debt, and what you do in this society is that you can sell debt. Okay, that's why you have debt consolidation companies that will buy your debt from another company. All right, now seemingly you have less debt, but ultimately you pay more in the long run because they just bump up the interest and they allow you to pay that over a longer period of time. Okay, let's read a little bit more of this. It says, but the island did see continual growth in one prime export debt. Mutual funds were still eager to buy Puerto Rican bonds, right? And that's how ESO gets you, because you say, oh, we're buying bonds and investment. Really, you're buying debt. Okay, emptiness, nothingness, negative. Okay, and that's the society. It's nothing. It's vanity. It's negative. It says even as its economy languished, because those bonds are triple tax exempt, which means that investment in interest payments go untaxed by the federal, state, and local governments. Okay, so why don't they just declare bankruptcy like Detroit did? Unlike U.S. Municipalities, Puerto Rico isn't covered by the Chapter 9 of the U.S. Bankruptcy Code. Gotcha. All right, so that's why we're bailing out Puerto Rico out. It says outlaws are particularly responsible for their plight. It says yes and no. It says the federal government is partially responsible for the island's financial distress, but no one is asking U.S. taxpayers to bail out Puerto Rico. It says, but I saw a bunch of ads, and it says a dark money group called the Center of Individual Freedom has spent hundreds of thousands of pounds of dollars on television ads to paint the house of current plan for restructuring Puerto Rico debt as a bailout. But the bill that Paul Ryan is desperately trying to rally his caucus around will cost U.S. taxpayers absolutely nothing. It says instead the legislation would empower a federal oversight board to oversee debt restructuring agreements and approve or reject local budgets on the island. Okay, so it says basically you can't collect money from an island of broke, starving people. So it is the interest of creditors themselves to get Puerto Rico's debt load down to a point where it can still fund the basic services, right, necessary for economic growth. So it's just like a house or a man that gets into debt, they go into what's known as debt consolidation, man. And that's what they're doing out there. Okay, so pretty much that's all I'm going to read on that article. I'm going to get into this now, okay, because this is directly relevant into what we're dealing with here, which is, the collapse of the dollar, all right, and so on and so forth. It says this is Puerto Rico to default on its debt Monday the 2nd of May. So we're going backwards of slight, okay. It says Governor of Puerto Rico announced the Commonwealth and the American territory, but not state, which is relevant to what we just read in this one of the paragraphs over here within this article, all right. And you got the backstory, you got to understand what they're talking about. It says and will default on its debt tomorrow. All right, 2nd of May 2016. So, like I said, 2 days ago. It says because Puerto Rico is not a state, it cannot avail itself of U.S. bankruptcy laws, and as such, they are very this will become a very messy situation very fast. It says bondholders who lent money to Puerto Rico will then lay claim to credit default swaps, a sort of financial insurance instrument, right? Which I was, debt consolidation, so you can understand. All right, or let's put it in terms to where the average black man understands. A woman, all right, and she likes to spend a lot of money. She has one credit card that she uses to pay off another credit card that she uses to pay off another credit card. That's essentially what they're doing. Okay, just moving debt around. Okay, it says bondholders who lent money to Puerto Rico will then lay claim to credit default swaps, CDSs. All right, a sort of financial insurance instrument which will trigger a required payout by entities which issued those CDCs, mainly banks. Trouble is, most of the banks don't have enough money to pay claims. Herein lies a very big risk of contagion. Right, this could mean several significant sized banks in the United States may fail within weeks. All right, so lead on to the next one. It says, and if and when banks begin to fail, bondholders who lent money to those banks would then lay claim to their CDCs. Remember, that was their insurance. Okay, and this will trigger still more banks into default and so on. The potential exits for these single Puerto Rican defaults to spread into one of the most worst financial catastrophes to take place in modern history. Okay, so you get a gist of what they're saying from off of the back of that, man. All right, is your bank one of these entities which is issued a credit for default swaps? Will your bank be the one that goes under? It says, bear in mind, the last October, the U.S. financial laws changed so that there is now a provision in law that calls for banks to be bailed in. Right, that means folks that have stock in failed banks who have bonds from those failed banks lose their money. All right, to resolve their failed bank. It says the euphemistically called a haircut. But for some investors it's a boldy. Some investors gets nothing. All right, so I spoke about that a little bit earlier on. It says watch financial markets very closely this week. If things go bad, they will go bad at lightning speed. All right, so it'll be it's 2 days on. All right, Friday, fingers crossed, all out economic collapse, and we hope for these things here at GMS because this is the end of your society, right? And the beginning of ours, all right? Like it says in the book of 2 Ezra, the 6th chapter and the 9th verse, Esau is the end of the world, Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. It says, watch financial markets very closely this week. If things go bad, they will go bad at lightning speed. Too late for many people to get out and save themselves. And it says, this is what economic collapse looks like. Puerto Rico's stunning economic crisis have virtually bankrupted the island, forcing thousands of Dominicans from all walks of life to return home, leaving behind shipping companies, restaurants, cafes, bakeries, beauty salons, barbershops, and businesses in Puerto, in Rio Piedras. Okay, I think that's it. And let's see if they got any more. So they're just giving you what's happening out there within Puerto Rico. I'm not really gonna get into that, so because I've blurted out quite a lot of information to take in there. It would be needful for you might want to read this for yourself, go back and read over it. Some good articles there, some good information, and some luck. Hey man, this could trigger off what they're calling the worst financial catastrophes out there. Right? All right, so with that, I'm going to say, all praise unto Yahweh, Shimi outside, double honors to the elders at GMS. Honestly, brothers, I'll be pushing this truth in sincerity. Shalom.